Welcome to the Cricket Matters podcast. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure to subscribe and review when you have a chance to help build the Cricket Matters audience around the world. With me, as always, is my co-host and fading star of TikTok. That's what I'm going to call you now, James Breeze. James, how you doing?
Not too bad, mate. Fading star. I'm not having any of that today.
You're just not getting the views anymore, are you?
No, TikTok algorithm has changed. It has changed. It's not the level of the content. It's the algorithm. That's what I'm going to blame.
Exactly. Today we've got a cracking guest for you, so you don't just have to put up with me and James droning on. A former professional cricketer for Middlesex and Sussex before embarking on a career as a professional coach. He helped launch the Middlesex Academy in the early 2000s and was head coach when they became T20 champions in 2008. He was batting and assistant coach for the West Indies when they were crowned T20 champions in Sri Lanka in 2012, and when they defeated England, boo, in a test series in the Caribbean for the first time in 17 years. Former head coach at Glamorgan, he's an ECB Level 4 coach and currently presents batting for the ECB on Level 3 and Level 4 coach education courses. He is, of course, Toby Radford. Toby, welcome to the Cricket Matters podcast.
Afternoon, guys. Good to be here.
Great to have you on. Thank you so much. Pleasure to have you here. Should we just crack straight on? Because Toby is limited for time. We've been chatting off air. We should have just started recording, shouldn't we?
Should have done, yeah. My fault.
We will jump straight in with our regular first question, which is, Toby, could you just please tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself, how you got into coaching, and why does cricket matter to you?
Why does cricket matter? Well, I got into cricket through my dad. Born in Caerphilly in Wales, in South Wales. And from a very early age, my dad, who'd enjoyed club cricket, playing club cricket down in Gowerton in West Wales, started throwing tennis balls at me from the age of 4 or 5. And that carried on, really. We moved to England when I was about 9 or 10, started playing for Berkshire youth schools, Middlesex schools at the age of 10 or 11. But it was really my dad who was driving it, practicing with me after school, any bit of wasteland, any old tennis court, throwing tennis balls. It was literally, sort of hard work and hard graft.
Yeah.
I played professionally at Sussex and Middlesex, played for England under-19s, did a lovely couple of tours with them to Australia and New Zealand, which was great.
Nice.
And then at the back end of my career, I hit 25 second-team hundreds for Middlesex, which is a record. But I didn't quite get into the first team, and it was a bit like being at Barcelona at the time. It was an international side. I was in the second team scoring runs, couldn't break in all the time. So I'd get in, senior player would come back, I'd be back in the second team. So I started to lose a bit of confidence, and my career then sort of faded away playing-wise at the age, quite young really, 24, 25. And then I thought, what am I going to do? Had a degree in journalism from City University in London. Did I go down that route, or did I stay in cricket? Cricket had been my life, really, for a long period of time. So went into coaching. So I went into coaching young at the age of 25. Did all my coaching badges, used to coach in the schools in London in the winter, setting up 30 kids make sure it's safe around the piano in a little sort of, I mean, literally like that. I absolutely learned coaching at the base grassroots level and then worked my way up. Set up the academy at Middlesex, became a national coach at the ECB, used to run the England under-15s, under-17 team. Went back to Middlesex, ran the second team, ran the first team. And then went off to work in the West Indies, which was, I think the best thing I ever did. Absolutely loved it. Be on a jet ski by 5 o'clock every afternoon. Who could not love that?
You bugger.
Oh, it was brilliant. And, it was great. I actually set up the first ever West Indies Academy in 2010.
Wow.
And had Jason Holder on that, who's still very good mates with me now. Young Jace, who was always a tall lad at 6'7" or whatever he was at the age of 19. Shannon Gabriel. A lot of the first team, current West Indies team, came in as 18, 19-year-olds. So I've known them a long time. So I worked with them, which was brilliant. That went well, and as they progressed then into the senior side, I think it made sense to the management. Look, Toby, a lot of your players are here. Do you want to come and work with the first team, which was great. So
love it.
Started working with Gale and Samuels and Shiv and all the heroes that I'd grown up watching. And you're suddenly working with them and hopefully trying to help them a bit. So it was wonderful. Did that for a period, came back, took the job at Glamorgan, did that for a few years. Bit of politics, wouldn't be the first to say that with Glamorgan. Actually went very well. From a player's point of view, Chris Cook, David Lloyd started coming through, some young players. We had a run of wins. I think we had 4 or 5 championship wins in a row, which was one of the highest runs they've ever had, I think, in county cricket in Glamorgan. Bit of politics. They needed me out to get someone else in, so I then went. And I ended up going back to the West Indies and did another 3 or 4 years with the senior West Indies side. And then the last 3 or 4 years, I've worked with Pakistan, I've worked with Bangladesh, and travelled a fair bit, but tended to be more to the east, really, as I say, sort of Asia, which has been a real great, different culture for me. Lovely, very humble lads to work with. So I've really enjoyed that. So that's tended to be it. And then in and around that, I'm then working with quite a lot of senior county and some international players over here, batters. So I'm doing some work with Dom Sibley at the moment, Joey Everson down at Kent, Feroz Kushi at Essex. So I've got a nice little stable of county players that I work with fairly regularly, which is good.
It's fun. It's like Dom Sibley. Like I was at Wicket to Wicket the other day, and Jones the Bat mentioned you brought Dom Sibley was coming down there, which is fascinating. Like in the back end of Beyond in the valleys. I'd never thought Dom Sibley would be coming down there anytime soon, but.
Yeah, but it's a great facility. This new facility in Kunkan, it's fantastic, and I've been going in there since it pretty much opened September time. So pretty much all my private work now in the UK, players come to here, and they will travel. I've had them down from Yorkshire, Lancashire, they'll come in from Birmingham, and that's a mix of academy players of those counties, or or proper fully fledged international or county players. So, which is great because it's such a lovely facility. But you don't expect to see it, do you? Down to the
valleys,
and Dom's driving up.
Even I know the valleys. No, exactly.
I took Josh. We did some before Wicket to Wicket was open. So we went to this indoor school at Ebbw Vale. And me and Josh did some filming on some just basic movement stuff and some rolling and some stretching and stuff. And we did it all
facility there, wasn't it? Great facility.
That was Josh's first experience inside the valleys, and I took him to. And I always find this amusing, like Marks and Spencers in Merthyr Tydfil. It always doesn't quite. It's always quite a funny thing, and it's like, there's a Marks and Spencers in Merthyr Tydfil. Yes, that's where we go for lunch, Josh. There we go. So he's experienced it too. That's all.
Before James, hang on. Before I hand over to you, because obviously the running joke on this podcast is that I don't know anything about cricket, so you're going to get technical with Toby. You mentioned before, Toby, that your sort of career ended kind of early, around 24 or so. What is the sort of optimal age for a cricketer then? Because obviously, I know footballers mid to late 20s, up to maximum 29, 30 is probably optimal age. What about for cricketers?
Some will go on late 30s, batters or spin bowlers. Obviously, the pace bowlers, it's more tricky because of the loading and which is what's incredible about James Anderson, the length of career he's had. Jimmy, he's hardly touched wood.
How old is he now?
Well,
40.
He's got to be. Yeah, that probably is 40.
Is he really?
Yeah, same age as me, same year, 1982.
Unbelievable. Wow. To the number of balls he must have bowled in that career.
My word.
Very, very few injuries. He's not got one of those actions which is explosive in a sense, so you don't feel he's putting the load on that maybe some of the other quickies do. But it's brilliant that he stayed fit that long.
So maybe the question is, what does he do outside of cricket to keep himself fit and healthy? Perhaps.
I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I think he plays his bit of golf, and he had his bit of downtime. But I think he's always bowled within himself. He's been quick. He's been quick enough without being a rapid. He's not someone who, as I say, is explosive at the wicket. It's swing and control, but at a good enough.
He's obviously looked after himself, hasn't he? Obviously.
Definitely. Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
That's the thing. Which I wasn't expecting that question, Josh. But no, it was cool. But it's like, it's just a thought topic, because I just using Jimmy Anderson as an example, right? So in our world of movement and health and fitness that we see, there's a phrase from the great sprinter Charlie Francis. It looks right, it flies right. And he talks about how the speed of what they get to. So I use Jimmy Anderson as a great example. We can all look at his action. We can all say how great his action is and how wonderful it is. That's perfect. But what I look at is the way he moves around the field, the way he walks, the way he carries himself. It's effortless. You with me? So I see the way he moves as an athlete. Not just take cricket out the whole equation. He moves effortless. He has this ability to move, and it's hard to say. He doesn't look stiff. He doesn't look limbered. Whereas a lot of players, this is from professional footballers I watch as well, and a lot of cricketers I see, they look stiff and immobile. Their shoulders are very rounded over and hunched over, which is something I want to talk about when we get into the batting stuff later on. But they look stiff. as they're walking, they're like carrying hay bales, like farmers. Does that make sense?
He's quite a slight build, isn't he? I mean, I've stood next to him a few times. He's taller than you think, but he's quite slight, strong, but wiry strong. He's not muscle bound. He's not someone who's gone in the gym and pounded himself and is almost too heavy and too bulky up top. He's not that type of bowler, is he? And I think that's got to play a part in it. I think that he's not carrying excess weight.
And that's the thing. Like, that's the I was going to more about batting. This is turning into bowling a little bit now. This is fantastic. But that's the question I asked. That's the question. Like we kind of touched a little bit on off air. So when we talk about the world in professional baseball, so a lot of the baseball pitchers, they're now not touching the barbell. They get rid of the barbell altogether because it's adding too much load onto their shoulders, onto their spine, and it's adding too much bulk to their frame, essentially. However, what I'm seeing across the board on Instagram, I don't always believe Instagram, right? I have no idea what's happening behind the scenes. There's lots of heavy barbell work as if they're rugby players. And that's why I'm starting to talk about, I'm seeing weight training done as rugby players on cricketers, whereas shouldn't the model be Jimmy Anderson in the sense of like, I know everyone's got different body types. I know you can't really narrow it down here, and Jimmy Anderson has his own body type, but like, if you talk about longevity and the issue when there's serious back injuries in the game at the moment, and it's a constant theme. What can we learn from outside of these sports that could be changed differently? And is there something? I don't know the answer. I'm just like hypothesizing. It's good to see you share that insight, because like that's what we see. We see a whippet. We see like wiry, strong, lean, athletic, and moves well. Yeah. So is that potentially the default model, not these big bulky cricketers? I don't know.
Yeah.
So
it's the trade-off, isn't it? I mean, if you're too bulky, you're slower to move. You're going to break down more easily, as you said. There's extra load on those things. It gives you power as a batter. I mean, if you have that bit of extra, in the right area, you've got strong forearms, strong shoulders, strong back. You're going to be able to hit the ball a bit harder. But if you start getting too bulky, you don't move as well. You don't move as fast when the ball's quicker and back. So it's a trade-off, isn't it? You've got to find the balance. I think it's all about balance, really. It's all about balance.
Massively.
Be powerful enough without being bulky.
Yeah. Powerful enough, strong enough, mobile enough.
Yes. Yes.
There's all these different things. So, like, well, that's kind of a nice little segue into the world of batting, because that's your speciality, really, isn't it, Toby? Your batting is your speciality. That's your niche, and you've really narrowed down with the names. Like it's on your website, like it's a who's who of cricketers. There's some great ones. The one that stuck out to me was David Milan, because he is somebody that I admire greatly, because he's such a destructive batsman, but he makes it look so effortless. And like as a left-hander myself, you watch him bat, and it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. So he resonates a lot to me. But like in terms of batting, right? Like, what are some of the traits that you can say that some of the elite players have? And this is a generalist question to begin with. What are the traits in terms of practice and what they do best from the people worked with, compared to the ones trying to make it and maybe the club cricketer? What is the difference between that level in terms of, we don't go technical yet, but just the general traits that they have about them that make them who they are?
Work ethic. I mean, if you come back to someone like a Milan, I actually signed him at Middlesex a number of years ago as a youngster, but spent hours on the bowling machine. He was hitting bucket of ball after bucket of ball to make that cover drive look effortless. To make that look effortless, he's hit thousands and thousands of cover drives and pull shots. So I think that work ethic to get it right. And in fact, a lot of the South Africans I've worked with, I mean, no one hits more balls than the South Africans. They just want to practice all day long. And when I ask them why, they say it's so competitive in their school system in South Africa that unless you're better than all the others, you're just not going to get anywhere. So they all work that bit harder than they do over in the UK for sure. So I think that's the first thing. I mean, what I've really done over the last, I've been lucky, I've worked with some of the world's best, and I've been in the nets next to the opposition world's best, Babar Azam, people like that. And what I've really done is studied what I think are the key components of world-class batting. And I've kind of broken it down into what I call the 5 fundamentals. And the last couple of years, I put it together for ECB. I started delivering it on their level 4. I started delivering it for counties, even for international cricket boards. I deliver this now for their coaches. And the 5 fundamentals basically were, when the ball is being released, the top batters tend to have their head close to the off stump. They keep their hands and the bat very, very close to their body or to the center of gravity, because then it's obviously easier to control. They align themselves not to the ball, but to the bowler's stumps. So everything is lined up very straight to the bowler's stumps. They don't move to where the ball comes out of the hand. They track the ball, but they only move to where the ball finishes. And when they hit the ball, they connect from a stable base, right? Now, within those 5 things, what it's basically saying, when you look at the world's best, that's what they tend to meet. And within those and around those, there'll be a lot of flair, a lot of individuality. It'd be a bloody boring game if everyone played the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not saying that's what happens and that's what they do. But actually, whether you take Ben Stokes or Kane Williamson or Virat Kohli or you throw them at Joe Root, they will tend to meet those 5 things. When the ball's coming out, be close to off stump. They line up back to the stumps. They don't, and there's a reason for each of those. And when I deliver to the coaches and the players here and abroad, I talk about why they do those 5 things. And as coaches, that's what we're kind of looking for. And subconsciously, that's what I'm kind of looking for. I'm working with a player or looking whether a player's up to it or not.
I like that. It's interesting you say that because we like to work in systems. So that's essentially your 5 steps is your system and your key checkpoints.
Yep.
So I'm assuming that in your head as a coach, you're then looking, right, if they don't tick these 5 areas, right, this is your first port of call, and then you move on, or have I just...
Yeah, I'm getting a general overview to start with. So I often say to the coaches, when I first work with a player I've never seen before, it doesn't matter whether it's an elite, international, whether it's a young club player learning out, starting in the game. I do the first 10 minutes. I don't say anything. I just watch. I'm just literally observing. I tend to film every session as well. So I'll always have the camera then to back up. But before I go in and make any comment, I make sure in my mind I'm really clear. So when I then show them, that camera is going to back up exactly what I say because I've got to get it right. Because you can't unsay it. You've got to get it right. You've got to be accurate.
Yep.
So that would be how I tend to work. Nothing for 10 minutes. Really observe. And then I'll be able to give them feedback on which would be their decision making, general movement, forward and back. And then it would be a little bit, and then in my head where they meet in and around those 5 key what I call the 5 fundamentals, and then would show them on the camera then so they can see it for themselves. And then we start to work out, well, right, this is what we're going to work on, and we start to work on it,
Brilliant. I like that. I like how you come back to systems, and that's your Steve. Because the same we go to systems. We look at 4 areas: health, movement, strength, and cardio. If they're not healthy, they're not going to perform well. If they're not moving well, and we have assessments under each of these, they're not going to perform well. We look at basic strength. We look at cardio. And if you have all 4 in balance, then we've got a good healthy athlete. But if there's nothing that's out of these things, then we need to fix these things first. So it's interesting. So going back to your point about the hit more buckets of balls, they're training the nets. So one of the things I've seen since coming back, now when I was playing cricket lots back 15 years ago, I was doing a lot of cricket, and I've gone away from the game, and I've come back into the game with a professional fitness head on. So one of the things that got me, and I've seen 2 things now in club cricket, because that's what I'm playing. In the net sessions, most batsmen have maybe 10 minutes in the nets, 15 minutes if they're lucky, and they go in and they have a bit of fun, and that's it. The other thing that I see is on Saturdays, a lot of club cricketers get to 20 and 30, right? And then they get out. And I like to put it down to the idea that it's due to lack of fitness, right? And also most of the time they're training in the nets for 10 to 15 minute slots. They're not batting for these long periods of times. You talked about right at the start that these guys are hitting balls for hours.
Oh yeah.
Right? Hours and hours and hours. So where is that disconnect where between club cricketers and people trying to make it at the moment here, but obviously the elite level is different. Like, where's the disconnect with people understanding this? And for you, there's 2 elements to this. I'll do the first part. In an ideal world where time's no object, money's no object, right? What would be the ideal net practice for somebody who's batting? How would you structure their net practice? And in terms of like maybe something you're doing, but also in time as well to carry over to the game to match day.
Well, look, my sessions vary massively. I mean, I worked with a player this morning. It was a 1-hour session. Sometimes I'm working with a player. We'll do 4 hours in the day. So if you take a Sibley, you do 2 in the morning, have lunch for an hour, have another 2. So you'll do 4 hours in the day. I worked with a South African test opener last year, a guy called Sarah Irve, a left-hander, fine player, international player. We did 6 hours, and it was all bobble feeds. It was all underarm feeds. Because he wanted to groove a new trigger movement, the pre-delivery movement before the ball's released. So to do it, it was underarm, and he was meticulous. He just wanted we had chalk marks on the floor where he was going to move from, where he was going. He just wanted it absolutely grooved. So as the pace went up to 80, 90 mile an hour, he knew his feet were going to hit the right mark, and if the feet hit the right mark, everything else takes care of itself, and that's the thing. So there's a guy at the top end probably doing 6, 7, 8 hour sessions, full days,
Yep.
and then you'd have someone else doing an hour. So it varies massively depending on where the player's at, level of the player, what you're working on. Sometimes I'm not a massive one for using bowling machines. I like bowling machines used in the right way, but I don't use them a lot. I do a lot of bobble feeds, overarm throwing feeds, a mix of stuff depending on what you're working on and the level of the player and the skill you want to try and hone, really. And sometimes you're absolutely breaking something down into its real component part. Let's get that right, and then rebuild it depending on, again, what you're working on.
It's interesting. If again, a lot of people don't have access to coaches, sometimes not even finances to go and do, say, 6 hours with you in one go.
Yeah.
So how would you help them? So, like, let's just say that they're lucky enough to have an hour with you each week, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's a sort of like thing that we want to expect them to see them do from a beginner, like a bare minimum standard for the rest of the week to right up to test level with Dom Sibley? What are the levels you expect of them to be training and batting or practicing what you've been working with them?
So someone comes in and there's a few things you see, and I often talk about root cause. So if there was one area that if you really worked on this and honed this, all the other things would take care of themselves, right? So let's get to what is the root cause. Because with a player, you might say 5 or 6 things. God, there's a lot going on there. Well, actually, they're nearly all linked, and they're nearly always linked if we can get to the main one. So hone in on that area. That normally comes back to the type of things we were talking before: setup, alignment, the balance. When the ball's being released, are they in a position where they can move easily forward and back? Can they get offside? Can they get leg side? 99 times out of 100 they can't. There's too much weight on the back foot. They're too far to the offside. The head is outside the feet. So I spend a lot of time shaping that, creating that, them seeing it. And that can be me walking up and down the net a lot of times. So the first session can be a real grind and the hardest session they'll do. Now, once that starts to take shape, I would then say, if they go away, right, get back in front of your mirror, back in the house, check your position for yourself. They've got to start then to feel what we see. And then when they can feel it, hang on a minute, you're starting to coach yourself now, right? You're starting to know where you are in relation to space and where the ball's coming from. And it will be a gradual build up from that. Once you've got that, then you're introducing the ball. So initially, no ball. Then you introduce the ball. And then from that solid position, now we're moving into good positions. We're balanced. We're playing our drives. We're playing our back foot punches or whatever the shots are. Because I come back before, the shots aren't difficult, but they are if you can't get in a balanced position to play them. So all my effort and time is spent on getting those nice balanced positions and them feeling it and not needing me to say, hey, George, your head's still falling over or whatever. I want them to feel it. So the next bit is to answer your question in a long way. They can go away and work on that. They can film, everyone's got a mobile phone now, they can film their club net doing the drills, and I give them a series of drills, basic drills. You go away, do these, and hopefully I'll see you in a week's time and I'll see improvement because you'll have done your drills. It's a bit like your homework, really. Go and do your basic homework, and I will see improvement next week. And like any teacher, I can see when a player comes back if they've done their stuff or if they haven't. It's evident straight away because they look more balanced and, they're getting a better bat on the ball,
I'm just like, from a fitness perspective, like, when we're working with people and from varying abilities, like to more elite people to beginners, what we see personally is that the bare minimum is 3 training sessions a week. 3 training sessions a week is the bare minimum. Like, that's not going to make you change. That's not going to change you. That's not going to change here. What we see from the best people is they're doing something every day. And so they do something every single day. And on top of that, they do extra things such as, I'll give you this very simple example. Imagine they're strength training 7 days a week. Just imagine that. But on top of that, the ideal would be they're doing some form of cardio on top of that. And another thing, they're doing maybe some mobility. So 3 things each day, but varying on the abilities and what they're doing. Now, again, it's not reality. Reality, people can't do that most of the time. So we try and aim for at least doing something 5 days a week as a thing to see in continual improvement. So in terms of like doing those practice things, those drills you're doing in front of the mirror, I'd say that's one of those extra things you potentially do. Would you then look to see the batsman getting down in the nets or against the bowling machine or something, that sort of level as well?
I think there's a real danger with batting. there's a real what I call pattern of movement, right? And everybody has their own unique pattern of movement, which is either a little movement that they don't even want, or they don't even know that they've got, that when the ball's being released, they get into a position. And sometimes you've got to break these bad habits. And you start to break them by taking the pace down. So bobble feeds in the mirror, seeing it on the camera, until gradually they start to feel it. Oh, hang on, I felt that one. Great. Now we're getting there. You can feel it, right? Now, the danger is if you go too quickly back to the club net then at the weekend, all that good work you've done rebuilding the house, suddenly the whole thing falls down again. So I'm very much about let's build it gradually until you go back to bowling and the speed of bowling when you are now right to do it and you can cope with it. The minute you can't, you go back to where you were before. And I often do that, go up and back, till gradually we've got this real improvement and the player is where you now want them to be or where they want to be. But I think there's a danger in starting to do the rebuilding, and they're too quick and they're too impatient to get back in against face George at the weekend. And hang on a minute, I'm not really ready for that movement. Otherwise, I go straight back to default, and I've got my, and all the good work I've done is wasted.
Do you know what that reminds me of, James? Perry's phrase, "Speed hides need."
That's it.
Speed hides need in the fitness world. It's one of our good friends who talks about that. Is basically like if someone has a weakness, they'll rush through that movement or that part of the movement because when they slow it down, that's when it really shows up that they've got this issue. So you need to slow it down. You need to practice slow, perfect it slow, and then build. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Same thing.
Exactly. It does. Josh, I could see you jumping in there because I knew you were going to say the same thing I was, because that's what speed hides need. And I'll give you an example in the fitness world from where we're coming from, exactly what you just said. So let's just take some. What I see time and time again, particularly coaching now more and more, is that people don't have basic gait pattern. They don't have the basic gait pattern. Right, I mean, a mixture of levels here now, from very high level cricketers to not test levels, because I've never worked with that level. But like the point is, from what I'm seeing, at very good club level, trying to make the grade down to amateur, they don't have good gait pattern. And what I mean by good, when they don't have good gait pattern, they don't have good core control. So the way we regress things back is, it sounds ridiculous. We get them on the floor, we start them rolling like a baby, right? Literally crawling on all knees. We build them up to getting off their knees and crawling in forwards, backwards, sideways here. So they have all their bodies in motion, because the core doesn't work really well unless it's working with a locomotive pattern to it as well. So we regress it all the way back, because you can't change movement without regressing all the way back for us. And if you start sprinting before you can crawl, quite literally, it changes everything up. And it's fascinating you saying that with batting, because it's like, again, I'm not an expert in batting coaching. That's not us. But hearing that, but it's hard to get that across to players. Yeah. So when you obviously the level of players you're working with, they're going to be receptive and listening to you. But how do you get across to a player as a coach to say, look, we need to regress this all the way back? Because it's a bit of an ego boost hit sometimes, isn't it? We take them all the way back from bubble feeds.
But it's a selling job, and I'll often say, look, I've been in the net. This is an honest truth. I've said I've been in the net at Headingley, morning of a test match. Stokes is in the net next door. Ramprakash is with a tennis ball doing bobble feeds, top hand drills. I said, if it's good enough for Stokes, it's good enough for you. And that's all I have to say. And then they do it. And it is. And Owen Morgan, I signed Owen. Owen does them. Milan does. I mean, all these lads. And they do it for a reason. They do it for a reason because it's like the pianist doing his scales. It's honing good basics. Yeah. And then when you turn the pace up, I'm in good balanced positions and I can move well. Therefore, my bat's coming down straight and I'm hitting the middle of the bat, and that's what I'm paid to do. So they see the value of it, and it's a bit of a selling job. But I find a lot of youngsters generally will buy in anyway. There aren't many who don't. There aren't many. Normally, they're the impatient ones, and they generally don't go anywhere anyway. I find they've either got the answers or they're trying to get there too quick. So I don't really have too much of a problem with it.
How do you find coaching women compared to men in that sense? Because this is like abusing every man out there now who listens to us, But we find when coaching, we get more receptive. We can progress women faster in coaching because they're more receptive to ideas and they're not know-it-alls. Does that make sense? And I don't mean in a bad way to a lot of good people out there. Do you see there's a big difference more in the amateur? That elite level is different, right? Because you know that here, but they're there for a reason. But do you find there's a difference between amateur men and women, the way you coach and the way they progress, and they're more receptive to that type of stuff?
I do, and I think there's like sponges. I think the women tend to soak it up a bit quicker. I think often because they haven't had the volume of coaching. Certainly, if you took a young a boy cricket or a young girl cricketer, the young boys had a lot of input, whether it's club or school or dad or what, and some of them can have had so much they think they know it, or I've heard this before, whatever, whereas the girl often hasn't had a lot, therefore is all ears, can't take enough, and they just tend to sponge it up. So my experience is they're very good to work with. They can make changes quickly because they really apply themselves. I was working with a girl this morning who made great changes in an hour, fantastic, along those lines. And in fact, I was having this conversation with saying how well I thought she was able to make the changes and to take the information on board. So whether it's just a women-men thing, I don't know. We're like into a sexist battle, but
no.
I think there is. I do think there's something in it because it's what I have found in my own coaching over the years, and I've done stuff with England women, West Indies women, but they're always great to work with. Always good to work with.
And that's the thing. I see the women's game exploding in the next. It already is. It's getting bigger and now. But it's just something I just want to. Again, listen to the guys out there listening to it. It's sometimes at the club level, like there's a reason we're saying these things, and it's trying to just understand that it's there to help you. We're not there to reduce your ego in any way, shape, or form. So
maybe the guys have just developed more bad habits because they've had too much input, perhaps, and as you say, the women have had less input, less time to develop bad habits. Maybe
there's probably an element of that as well. There probably is an element of that.
There's so many things. There's so many different tangents I can now go off on this. This is wonderful. I love talking this stuff because it's kind of the stuff that I geek out. But let's go to some of the questions like we've had from some of the people So Greg Holmes, who's captain of Cardiff first team, he's put a couple of questions for me, and we've already covered one. What are your fundamentals of batting? We've covered that in your five steps. But the one he asks very specifically is can you teach a player to have more time when batting?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of comes almost subconsciously through training and increasing pace in training. And the way I've tended to do it is to practice off a shorter pitch. So instead of throwing off 22 yards, I tend to throw off 18 yards, 17 yards. So reaction time is naturally reduced. And players, you can always be that bit sharper, right? You can always you can always react that bit quicker. You can always move that bit faster, always. And what you tend to find is when you really hone that skill of going that bit closer, sharpening, then go back to the 22 yards. The batter often feels like they're facing a beach ball. I mean, the ball looks massive. They just feel like they've got time. Okay. And I remember many, many years ago, it was a second 11 county game, Middlesex against Leicester. And there was a fast West Indian guy called George Ferris, who was genuinely quick, up in the 90s, one of the quickest in the country at the time. And he was at one end. And there was another guy, I'm trying to remember his name, who was a quick bowler at the time. His name will come to me in a minute. And he seemed so medium pace that day. But on another day, when George Ferris wasn't at the other end, and I only had him, he seemed quick, which told me, and that's always stuck with me, you can always be that bit sharper. So I find that reducing the length of the pitch works really well for players. It's like the runner, isn't it? Putting the bricks on the back, the loading, and then taking the load, and suddenly you go flying around the track or whatever. It's that kind of stretching you again. It's stretching you, and then when you take it off, hang on a minute, I'm reacting quicker, I'm moving quicker. So that tends to be how I'll do it with players.
It's funny you say that because it's that's the speed at one end making somebody else feeling really slow at the other end. Because I just went back to my police driving days. So when I did the level 1 pursuit course, it was fast car, and on my final exams, you have the instructor at the front, and I was having to chase him. And one of the things they teach you throughout the course is the importance of what range checks. So you check the speed of what you're doing, because the speed of what you're doing is completely different to the anticipation of people around you, right? Yeah. So I'll never forget this. I remember calling my range check on the M1 going north, and this is perfectly legal. It's part of the exams and what we're doing here. I was doing 163 miles an hour, chasing one of the guys in front of me, right? Doing the range checks, because you have to have the half mile and 1 mile markers, because this is why the half mile and 1 mile markers on motor are so important, to know how far you are to the junction. So if the bandit car starts to pull off, you need to know where to slow down and come into the thing here. Yeah. Going from 163 to 120 feels like you're doing 30 miles an hour. And that's the big, honestly, it was such a funny thing. You go, holy crap, I'm still doing 120. Going down to 70 felt like you're doing 30. It was ridiculous. So it's funny you say that, like the speed, because again, like it's like, you got Mark Wood or whatever at the moment, it's like bowling 90 something miles an hour. And it's someone that's 80 miles an hour. It's a different adjustment, isn't it? Almost.
It is.
Like that sort of thing. Perception.
It is, and that 10 mile an hour is a lot. What you used to see as well, where you'd have the minor counties teams every now and again would play against the first class teams in I think it was the John Player Special or Gillette Cup years ago, and they'd get knocked over by the quick bowler. But then often those players, if they came into a staff and they'd spend a bit of time in the county setup in the nets every day facing your quick bowlers, they just adjust. They just get used to it. So as long as the player has the technical ability to go on and play a next level, I think that playing the pace isn't a problem. I think you adjust to it. I just think you adjust to it, and nearly everyone will adjust to it. But you've got to have the technique.
Yeah. That's a really good point, actually, because I think there's a lot of dads who listen to this podcast and a lot of kids who are in the academies going through now. And some of the questions I hear about just from general chit chat is like, how do I teach them play the quick bowlers? I think that's a really good point you just put across. It's something they'll adapt to and they can train themselves to. But if they have the fundamentals in place first, like you say, in the basics, that's something you can train them and get them to adapt to it, and then they'll kick on from there. So
the other thing as well, you take out that fear of injury or fear, which is get a tennis ball, wrap it in insulating tape like I did when I was a youngster. I come back to my practicing a lot with my dad when I was younger. We had an old disused school nearby, and it had like a marble type floor in it, and he would be off about 16 yards and insulating tape around this tennis ball. It would skid. And off 16 yards, this thing was quick. But if it hits you, it's a tennis ball, right? So you don't have any fear, and you take a few knocks, and you get. And then the bowlers then would come in, the quick bowlers off 22 yards. You think, well, hang on a minute, I feel like I've got a lot of time. You suddenly knock it in there. You just feel like you've got time. So finding ways to practice doesn't have to be with a hard ball, but just limit the reaction time a little bit to just sharpen yourself up and sharpen your feet up.
Nice, like it.
Awesome, I like that. That's fascinating. I like that. Cheers, Toby. Right, there's another question from Greg. He's seeing as he's our biggest number one fan most of the time. He's always. I'm going to see him at Nets tonight anyway. We're doing now. But the last one from Craig. Does he have any drills to help players be more efficient with their footwork, i.e. forward, back, against pace and spin?
Any drills for it? I mean, the key thing really is, and we come back to where we started, which was the position that you're in at ball release, making sure you're not too wide, because obviously the wider your base is, the more you get stuck and it's harder to move again. So the wide base is good for T20. If you're looking to hit and power, end of an innings, you want to go wider because you're just looking to transfer power and you want a strong wide base, right? If you're facing a moving ball, red ball cricket, early in the game, new ball moving around, you'd want a slightly narrower base because you want to be able to transfer your weight slightly forward, slightly back. And we often talk about having your weight slightly more on the front foot than the back foot, so you can almost fall forward or you push off to push back, a bit like a sidestep in rugby. So it's just this transfer of weight. But to be able to do that, you need to make sure that when you set up, that your weight is a little bit more closer to the front foot than it is to the back foot. All right, so you're leaning a little bit more. Like drills for doing it. Again, rapid fire type stuff. So full tosses, rapid fire, and you're just moving from your static position, coming in forward. So it's about quickness of head and front foot getting into the ball. Same thing on the back foot, underarms, fast fire, rapid fire drills. Do a lot of that. Just sharpening up your movement and getting into position to play the shot. Right.
Cool. Awesome. That's another segue into the next question, actually, because Rayan Khan, who's based out in Saudi Arabia, he's actually one of our clients, actually, but he's an avid listener to the podcast. I'll read out exactly what he says. So he asks, what school of thought does Toby fall under when it comes to coaching power hitting? Julian Wood, for example, believes in a different technique for hitting versus batting. Traditional coaches believe it's just an extension of a normal cricket shot and the basics stay the same. Maybe the answer's somewhere in the middle, but what are your thoughts on power hitting versus batting?
Well, Julian and Wood and I are long-term mates. We played club cricket. We go back a long way. And actually, although we've been mates for 30 years, we played club cricket together. I've been very much down the batting side. He's been down the hitting side. But in Pakistan in October, November, we were in the rooms next to each other working at the Pakistan High Performance Centre, right? So we had a month and a half of each other. We worked together and it was great. It was great. So we're long-standing mates, played in the game, played with and against it. Suddenly be working together. And we basically speak the same language. Although he's hitting, he is still about, weight transfer. He's still about head has got to be still on impact, full face of the bat. It's not slogging. Don't see hitting as slogging. He's still a batting coach, but he focuses more on the hitting side. And I, as part of my batting, I do a lot of hitting, T20 batting, hitting at the end of the innings. But it's doing it in a structured way. It's good shot selection. It's solid base, head still, weight transfer through the shot. It's not aimless. Just have a whack and hope you come off. So there are good key technical things to hitting, and Woody would be, preaching those in the same way I would. And actually, when we work together, it's really nice. We sort of dovetail nicely.
Cool. Awesome. There we go. This is all tying in nicely. So I've got my list of questions here now.
Yeah.
Right. Next thing, and this is kind of coming from me a little bit more actually in terms of balance. You talk about being balanced. Everyone talks about being balanced at the crease, right? So my question to you is that in the world of fitness, we have our balance tests. Because for us, balance is a vestibular system, and it's not something, it's like a circus act that balances around. You've got to train the vestibular system to get really good at balance, which maybe have a better carryover to cricket. But what is your idea of balance? Other than rephrase, when you look at balance in a cricketer, how do you assess balance to begin with? And what are some of the things that you work with on improving their balance?
So balance for me is the position. What I'm interested in is when the ball comes out of the hand, that they are in a position that allows easy movement up and down the wicket, because that's where the game's played, up and forward and back, up and down the wicket, and access to the ball offside or access to the ball on the leg side. So, and I often talk to the players about drawing an analogy of a goalkeeper at a penalty shootout. If you're standing in the middle of that goal, you don't know whether he's shooting right, left, up, down. So you've got to be able to move all four corners of that goal, ideally, right? So batting's a bit the same. You don't know if the ball's coming at your foot, at your head, offside, leg side. And you have to be in a position that can get to all of those when you know where that ball's going, all right? So to enable that to happen, what we found over the years is you want a little bit more weight forward than back, because it's harder to get forward than back. And you don't want too much weight going to the offside where the ball starts, because if you start to go that way and the ball angles in, we've all been there, fall across the ball and you end up playing across a straight ball, right? And if I had £1 for every time I talk about go to the finishing line of the ball, I would be a millionaire now. Because it really, the secret of batting in many ways, and when you watch the world's best batters, if you take Babar Azam, I've got a fantastic still of Babar Azam, which is the ball has been released, it's halfway down from the bowler, and Babar Azam hasn't moved. His hands are still close to his body, his head is forward, he hasn't gone across to where the ball starts. He's watching it, he's tracking it, but he waits until he knows where the ball finishes and then he moves. And that's the secret of batting. So it's one of those 5 fundamentals that you track it and you move to the finishing line. So balance, you have to be in a position to allow you to do that, right? Which is why I spend a lot of time positioning people to feel it, learn it, and once you've got that, batting becomes a lot easier. It becomes a lot easier.
I like that. That's awesome. I kind of ties in another question. It's another question for me actually, because one of the things I'm seeing, and this is just from a posture biomechanics kind of way. So I'm a left-handed batsman, so I'm going to just do left, so you can see me on the side here now. What I'm seeing with a lot of cricketers, so let's just take their right shoulder. A lot of them, particularly if they're left-handed, they're throwing a lot. There's a lot of gunk and tightness and stiffness inside here. Now, again, maybe you can help me on this as well. Now, what I see a lot of is this. This is an exaggeration, that their front shoulder is up close to their ears like this. It's hunched over like this, and their head posture comes forward like this. Yeah. So they always complain about falling over to the offside. But I'm looking like you can do all the drills in the world, but until we release this shoulder, get it back and here, and release all the tension in the inside of your neck here, that you're always going to struggle to the offside. Do you see anything like that from biomechanically impacting that level of the game itself? It doesn't have to be shoulder like collapsing over, but anything else.
Massively, and I think you make a valid point there. Rigid, they look tight, and they almost kind of create the position. But some of these positions are new, and they're not, and me as a coach, I've got to be patient with them. I have to be patient. If I'm trying to help them get a better position, to them it feels new and weird and alien, and I'll often say, "God, it feels weird." Like, yeah, it feels dreadful, right? And I'll be walking up and down, and I'll get them right, and then 2 balls later they're back again, and I'll have to get my steps up that day, right? That's the hardest step. That genuine, until in the end they get so fed up of me going back and forth, they actually get it right in the end, because they don't want me going back again. And once they get that, that's when they can really move forward, because they are now in a position where the center of gravity is going more through the feet rather than outside the feet. Therefore, I can move up and down the wicket, not across to the offside. Because if I move across to the offside, my foot lands and I play across the front pad. It's as simple as that. It's basic physics, isn't it? So we've got to allow them to move up and down. So the only way I can get them to move up and down is if the head is closer over the feet. How do I get the head over the feet? I've got to bend my knees a bit more. Right? Now, one of the biggest things I see, and it will fit with you guys as fitness guys, is that there's 2 ways to bend the knees. Right? Now, the ideal way to bend the knees for cricket in the setup and the stance is to bend almost doing a squat, so that your knees don't get to the outside of your toes. Yes? But I see a lot of batters standing and their knees are getting almost to the outside of the toes, so their weight is going to the offside. And the minute they bend the knees under them rather than out from them, totally different games. They said, well, I can now hit the ball through mid on, I can now hit it through midway. They couldn't access those balls before, right? Now, that's nothing to do with the shot. That is purely, in your type of line of work, it's about your positioning and your body position to allow you to play the shot. It's as simple as that.
And that's, honestly, that's huge, because one of the things we're seeing is that we're having to reteach people how to squat and what hinges. Right. So like a squat is maximal knee bend, minimal hip flexion going down, so you can go down to this position here. But because of lifestyle, sitting down, from international cricketers, they travel everywhere, right? They're sitting down doing travel, planes, trains, automobiles, quite literally. Modern day life kids, they're sitting down all the time. They've lost this ability to understand what this hinge is. So like they don't know where the hips are in relation to the rest of their body. So again, one of your posts I watched the other day was like watching knees going over the toes and like flexing like that. And that's when I saw, and like I'm going, they're doing that because they don't know the hinge. And you see them, they can't touch their toes, which means to me they can't own the hinge pattern. So it's I love you saying that, because that's something I'm seeing, but I'm not a coach. I'm not like the batting expert, like to turn.
So if I look at some batters who are standing there now, right, and they're in their setup, and I can see the knee is almost outside off stump. So I know if that ball comes into middle and leg, he's got to pull that, or she have got to pull the knees back to then be able to go forward to access the ball. Well, by the time they've done that, the ball's probably hit them on the pad, right? Now, if the knees were bent in such a way that they weren't pushed outside the toe, but they were over the top of the knees were bent with the bum backwards, you know what I mean? So you're sitting more. Suddenly now, that ball, middle and leg stomach, can just go straight through it. And they can't work out why they haven't been able to hit the ball through mid-on for 2 years. It's as simple as that. It's just a body position to allow you to move up and down the wicket, and that's really it. It's simplest form.
That's awesome. Toby, like, there's so many questions I'd love to ask you now, but I'm aware of the time. You're going to pick up your son very, very soon.
He's got tennis tonight, and I love watching his tennis, and it's all movement, and I chat to the tennis coach, a great bloke, and it's all this stuff. It's all, and look, as I said, a lot of these things you transfer across sports, don't you? It's conditioning, movement, the ability to move. That's what it is, you know, and
exactly.
A rapid or a bat or whatever, you know.
No, exactly. So I think we'd love to have, like I said, we can continue this conversation again. I think maybe we'd love to have you back on. But I'll tell you what, for me personally, like I'll message you off air after, because I'd love to come and do a session with you myself, just on, because I coach myself, need coaches. So I'd love to, you know, like I'll reach out to you separately and we do that. But Josh, let's go into the rapid fire round to finish us off.
We've got 4 very quick questions, quick fire round to finish off. Don't think about too much, just say what comes into your mind. Favourite cricketer? He's thinking.
Chris Gale.
Nice. Worst cricketing moment?
My God. Worst cricketing moment. Oh, I've had a few where the side's been 60 for 6 and you want to jump off the balcony. I've had a couple of them.
Best cricketing moment?
Winning the World T20 with the West Indies in Sri Lanka.
That can't have been too bad, I think.
That was great.
Where did you have your favourite cricket teas?
Best tea, without a doubt, best food, Lord's Cricket Ground. without a doubt.
From Middlesex, there we go.
Yeah.
Nice. I think I remember on a previous podcast, when we were talking off air once, you said, everyone's just going to say Lords. Everyone's going to say Lords.
It is. That's true. People always leave a stone heavier when they play at Lords.
Fantastic. Well, Tony, we'll thank you so much. We will let you go and pick up your son. Enjoy the tennis coaching.
Much. Great to chat with you
And
guys. We'll do it again.
try and get you back on sometime as well.
Fantastic.
Exactly. And Toby, before we jump off air, where can they find out more about you? If they want to learn about more of your batting services, coaching services, how to find you?
Website is tobyradfordcricketcoaching.com, and I have a new book out, which is going well, chaps, on Amazon, here and abroad, which is all along the lines we've just talked, and it's called Getting to Grips, and it's all about batting, and it's very visual, and it's the sort of things we're talking about, head positions over feet, and it's got lines to make things. It's very simplistic for people to understand batting. It's not a complex thing. It's hopefully simplifying batting for us. All right.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Thank you. That sounds great. Getting to Grips, was that?
Yeah, Getting to Grips, a batting book. It's on Amazon. It's so hopefully you guys can see it there.
Fantastic. Well, Tony, we'll thank you so much. We will let you go and pick up your son. Enjoy the tennis coaching, and maybe we'll try and get you back on sometime as well.